Hello and welcome back. My name is Christian. I'm joined with my co-host Brandon, and you're listening to Have You Lost Focus? I'm currently still working on getting the history portion of this video out, but I've managed to complete the current conflict and what's been going on with that story. It is a little outdated by a week or two. Certain things have happened as well that we will touch on as the story continues to unfold, like the Saudi Arabian nuclear deal that Trump is trying to get through. That's for a later point. Currently, I'm putting a lot of effort into getting the history part of this video out because it really does shape the conflict as it unfolds now.
Yeah, I just want to thank Christian for trying his best to get through my starting and stopping for the history part because I basically had a huge document I had made. So I was trying to stick to the document as much as possible and not add any filler because if I added filler, then I would start messing things up. So there's a lot of stuff he has to edit, unfortunately for him.
It's all good, and I hope I get that out to you all soon. But for the time being, I wanted to release this part of the video because even though the history is important to understand how we got here, getting a video out that describes the current situation as best as we possibly could was important to me. Now let's talk about what's going on in the current day with our current conflict that is a war, that but isn't a war, but that's also over, but has also started again. And since you laid down so much of the groundwork, I'll let you take the lead and tell me where you want to go with this.
Yeah, sure. I think we should probably start with this article that came out. It's on Democrats.org, and the title is Trump has claimed more than 40 times that his war with Iran was nearly over. This highlights kind of the ridiculousness of this war, going into a massive war with a large nation with a decent military, and not having a clear goal in sight is partially why I was interested in looking at this war compared to other regime change wars, like Vietnam, like Afghanistan, because they all seem to be marred by sort of a loose goal and an incursion to a large nation without a whole lot of support on the ground. So, kind of one of the issues with these regime change wars, unlike other wars, I would argue, like Russia and Ukraine, is that the Ukrainians had a government that they trusted, they had elections, and they are willing to fight and die for their country. In these other areas that the US has been involved in, it doesn't really seem to be that. You do have armed resistance movements, don't get me wrong. I don't want to say that, the groups that we backed in Afghanistan or in Vietnam didn't want to fight and die for their nation as well. It's just that the support wasn't there as much as it is in, say, Ukraine. So if we had backed Ukraine over Russia and really supplied them heavily with arms and really backed them financially, I think that they would have had a much more successful time at beating back Russia and having a government that would be successful in the future. Here in Iran, I'll just quote Benjamin Netanyahu when he says you can't have a regime change from the air, right? So you can't just bomb the shit out of somebody and expect the government to change, especially a government like Iran that, for all of its faults, is a real government that's been going strong for about 50 years and has a clear succession of power when a senior official dies. So going back to the article, though, these claims of, oh, well, the war is almost over, the war is already over, we have a deal, the deal's near, oh, the deal's broken, oh, the war is still going on, oh, we're doing regime change, oh, we're going to steal their oil, which is something he brought up, oh, we're going to wipe out a whole civilization. This very rapidly fluctuating goals is never a good sign. I think it shows that we are in a protracted war with Iran that will not end without a clear off ramp that both sides can adhere to.
Which will obviously not happen because we want an entirely different thing than what the Iranians want. And also, this just showcases that we cannot strong arm them as much as, listen, I'm always willing to glaze the American government, or not government, the American military. We are definitely the most advanced military this planet's ever seen up to this point. But like, one, I think it's has a lot to do with the fact that we have a demented person in the Oval Office as well as a drunk that's running the Department of War. So that clearly doesn't help in strategic advancements, but like not only makes us look like a weaker nation than we are, like the way Russia has been shown to be a paper tiger because it couldn't properly invade and take over Ukraine. This puts us in a much weaker spot because it shows the Iranians that they can hold out, because they can also, for two reasons. One, it shows them that they're able to fight back effectively, and also it shows how much of a chicken Trump is to them. Because it's like if Trump, like if nuclear weapons were on the table for like the American government to use, Trump would be the person to use it, I would assume. And him not doing it, and him saying that he's gonna wipe a civilization off the face of the earth, and then not doing it, it just it shows that you're kind of just a little bitch, and it shows them that they don't have to take you seriously when you make these outlandish threats. I'm not sure what happened to like make him not do that, besides everything that would have happened to him if he did. But like, I don't know how else to say that. Besides, it just shows the Iranians that they have, as Trump likes to put it, cards. They have a lot of cards in their hand on the table. You know.
Yeah, and I think that empty threats thing is something that Russia does. Remember, Russia under the Biden administration, I believe Putin warned us of nuclear weapons, never used them because these are empty threats, and we're doing the same empty threats right now under Trump. Also, when you talk about the war, like America is the greatest nation on earth, and we have massive military. That military costs money. Right now, as of May 12th, the U.S. Iran wars cost $29 billion. The military has been requesting another $80 billion. And the consumer impact from inflation and fuel prices has been $60 billion. Not to mention, we've had 17 U.S. service members die. And this is also, spending is bad for our government debt. The Republicans are always the ones talking about lowering the debt. Not, what was Trump's whole thing to get into the business he's in now is lowering the price of eggs. Well, you think that's occurring, or do you think lower prices in general are going to be occurring because there's a war? No, of course not.
This is laughable. I know we don't have it. I'll put it in the description as well as on the screen now. But like, we started this conflict, which allowed the Iranians to control the Strait of Hormuz, and America started this conflict. Iranian got control of that strait, and then now America, as the nation that started this conflict, are charging other nations to use the strait as like some sort of protection tax or whatever. Like that's also just ridiculous to me.
Yep, it's crazy.
That will clearly contribute to price increases as well, because if these companies start paying a protection tax, where does that price go to? The
Consumer.
Yeah, and also this is also just interesting because we had this similar thing last year where the whole purpose of why we bombed Iran was to destroy their nuclear facilities. And then Trump goes on there and says that he destroyed them all. They're all gone. What did he say? Decades away from now obtaining a nuclear weapon. And then now we're in this war now for the same reason.
Yeah, kind of moving past our glorious leader talking about how he's either won the war or the war's over, moving on to the reality. Now the ceasefire deal's been broken. This is from AP News. U.S. and Iran escalate strikes across the Mideast. So I'll just read from the top. The United States and Iran exchanged strikes aimed at infrastructure and military targets on Saturday as their battle over the Strait of Hormuz intensified. The region has endured days of back and forth attacks in a conflict increasingly focused on control of the strait. The collapse of an interim ceasefire leaves no clear end in sight for the war that the U.S. and Israel began more than 4 months ago. Right, they began that war during Operation Roaring Lion, and then I think is what Israel called it, an Operation Epic Fury. Which whoever's naming the operations nowadays, holy shit, it's just. I don't know what the guy gets paid, but it's too much. If he gets paid $1, it's too much because the operation names have gone down. We used to have Operation Rolling Thunder. I don't know. I think the operation names are just really gone down under this admin. But anyway, going back to these strikes, we're trying to control the strait. And there's, as the article stated, there's no clear end sight for the war. So I think that, what can you really do about this? So kind of my thoughts after doing some research in this is that the war costs us billions of dollars. It's already cost us $29 billion. The military is asking for more money. We cannot do a regime change from the sky, clearly. So we're just bombing them relentlessly. And I don't really see an off-ramp here unless there is an agreement. But that agreement, there needs to be, I just feel as though it's almost like a problem where there's too many variables, right? Iran has all of these non-state actors like Hezbollah, like the Houthis, that kind of go off and do their own shit. If Israel, for instance, thinks that one of these groups is doing something that warrants them getting struck, which they do, because these are terrible groups, don't get me wrong, then this might mean that Iran will strike Israel, and then we might get back into this war over that, or it could just be what happened before, where Iran decides that a tanker has moved into a restrictive zone and they fire at it, and then we start firing back at them. And then we have to make sure that the strait is steady enough for people that are just operating shipping vehicles. They can deem it safe enough to actually travel and traverse the strait. There are just so many variables that are around this conflict. That's why it's just very messy. So I just worry that it's gonna be a long time before we actually see something steady, an agreement that's steady for all of these countries to be happy and these non-state actors to be happy. And it needs to be very stable. And if not, we're just going to keep getting into these conflicts that are just going to keep draining us of money, not to mention the increase in fuel prices, right? If you don't have stability and you don't have this strait open and companies feel like they're willing to do business through it, right? Or conduct trade through it or shipments of oil through it, then you're just going to keep seeing these high prices on your fuel, which means you're going to have high prices on your food, right? Because of transportation. So I just think that we've really caught ourselves in an odd predicament here. What do you think about that?
I would agree. The only thing I'd have issue with is your phrasing. I would not say that this is an odd conflict in any sense. I would say this is very clearly tactical stupidity, and anyone that has any form of intelligence could see that this would have been the outcome for a war with Iran. We hear it all the time as just like a meme, but I think it's become a little bit true, in which case Americans think that if you have less bodies dead, that means you win the conflict. I know I've seen that come around for the U.S. Vietnam War, and I think this is a clear example of that kind of mindset not being taken as a joke because you're too stupid to realize that that's not actually how wars are won or lost. The U.S. might only lose 16 people or 17 people at this current moment, and I'm sure the Iranian body count is in the hundreds, maybe thousands of people at the with all the bombing that we've done. But just because of we do that doesn't mean that we win, or if those numbers stay relatively the same, it doesn't mean that the U.S. is going to win, because a goal of a war isn't just to kill as many people; it's to affect some sort of outcome. And if your outcome is nebulous, as in or other incursions in the Middle East, as well as like the Vietnam War, for instance, like you're just gonna throw bodies and tax revenue at that problem.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I agree. And it actually leads me into another thing I want to mention is that one of the impetuses for going into this war was the Iranian government's crackdown on protesters. And they like I said, they slaughtered 6,000 to 30,000 people. Like I said, the reports fluctuate, but the number seems to be quite high. But since the start of this war, we have also been, this war has also been the result of Iranian citizens dying, anywhere from between 3,500 to 6,000. And I want to mention too that war sucks, right? Like people die in war, civilians die in war because sometimes civilians are around military infrastructure or strikes aren't coordinated very well or something is awry. But just to know the consequence of going to war and why you need, as Christian said, sort of like a clear reasoning and a clear goal, and it's not just about the amount of people dead, is that every strike can lead to someone who shouldn't die dying. So I can give you an example of that. There was a lot of independent investigations that the U.S. military hit Shajari Tabay Elementary School in Iran with a Tomahawk missile, and that missile killed 120 school children and 26 teachers, right? So those people didn't deserve to die. And you could argue that if we had clear goals, if this war was justified, that they are a justified casualty. But I think with the mixed messaging this admin has given us, coupled with them not taking civilian death seriously in other wars that we could actually have a major influence in and changing, that I don't think they're serious about this. I don't think they're serious about killing civilians. And I think that this war is only going to kill more people than it ought to. And it's a bad thing. I think it's morally wrong that we're doing this.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Again, this administration gets no benefit of the doubt from me for not only lying about or misrepresenting why we're going to war, from it being about their nuclear programs to it being about the Iranian government's treatment of its people, to we need to initiate a regime change, or oh, this isn't a regime change war, we're going back to the nuclear weapons thing, and then also about them controlling the strait versus we can't have them controlling the strait because that's a major trading route. These reasons have all changed, and not saying that the goals of a war can't change as time progresses, but the fact that a goal was never set and it was changing from the jump is the reasoning as to why I and you should not trust what this administration says its plan is. And on top of that, just going back to the article we were reading earlier, like you're claiming that talks are finishing up or the war would be over soon, or we just signed this deal even and then the deal falls flat in the next day. And just to quote Trump real quick, we are likewise winning big in Iran, and you will see the fruits of that labor very, very shortly. Like, what basis do you have to say this? And also, nothing's changed. In fact, things have gotten worse, and it just makes no sense because nothing has evolved in a situation that would make it any of the goals that we have stated. That if you just pick one of the goals that of the many goals that we said we have, none of them have gone closer to happening.
Yeah. And the US, we have the most powerful military on earth, and I think it deserves and requires someone who understands that responsibility and not someone who wants to devastate Iran's infrastructure by hitting power plants and bridges, talking about destroying a whole civilization overnight. I mean, this is not, it feels like a child that has all the toys they've ever wanted, and now they get to play with them however they want. And it doesn't feel like, it just feels like, oh, well, I'm the guy now with the nukes and the big missiles and the big guns, and I can just do whatever the fuck I want. And that's not how we should be wielding our military. Our military is the greatest weapon on earth, and we should use it for good purposes. Like a good purpose of the military was when we use it to destroy ISIS or help destroy ISIS. A good use of the military was when we helped defeat the Nazis in World War II. A good use of the military was when we backed South Korea during the Korean War. And I don't think that we are using the military for good reasons. It feels like we are using it for, at this point, not even for morally, like just for wrong reasons, but for almost like genocidal reasons. Like, yeah, we want to destroy. I mean, what is that even? I never even thought I heard that in my whole life. Actually, now I think about it, I never thought I'd ever hear a president say, "I want to like basically I want to wipe out a whole civilization tonight." That's insane.
It is insane. And it should be treated as the insanity that it is. In a normal world, I feel like a statement like that is justification for, if not impeachment, like a hearing for impeachment at the very least.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course.
and even the reasoning for going into Iraq and Afghanistan, the faulty intel that he was saying about weapons of mass destruction, even though that information was shoddy at best and was just if I remember correctly, it was kind of known to be false. But after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, it was kind of, you couldn't really oppose doing stuff, right?
Yeah, there's broad popular support for it. Also, I think another reason for wanting to go to Afghanistan was to depose the Taliban's authority there, which
Yeah.
also could be like another reason, right?
Yeah, exactly. But so like these are more, at least they're solid reasons for wanting it. Like we literally have no reason to be in Iran besides just the whims of a madman.
It's not even about the reason so much as if you are going to do regime change war, you need to make sure that there is enough support on the ground, which is a lesson that the US doesn't seem to really learn. It's important because you think about Afghanistan. I have not done that much research into Afghanistan. Maybe later on we can do research into it. But as far as I know, there are a lot of forces in Afghanistan, military forces that wanted to depose the Taliban. And we learned this lesson in Vietnam too, right? Vietnam, the North Vietnamese army was backed heavily by the Soviets, and there were groups that did want to fight against them, but their numbers and their morale wasn't high enough, and their ability to preserve the government if we did pull out wasn't high enough. And you see that in America in these regime change wars. What happens when we usually pull out of these countries? They just fall right back into the hands of a more nefarious government, right? Am I correct about that?
I would say, yeah. Look how the Afghanistan army to fall apart. Granted, Trump didn't include them in the negotiations, but
Yeah, yeah.
they fell apart pretty quickly.
Yeah, so I wanna link a video. Maybe we could put in the description. There's a historian that's written a book on the Vietnam War called Jeffrey Wayrow, and it's on this podcast called the School of War podcast. And we can link it in the video. But he talks about one of the things that inspired me to talk about the U.S. Iran war stuff and the issue with regime change wars was listening to this historian talk about the Vietnam War, because he does highlight that issue that the soldiers in the Vietnam War, the U.S. soldiers, would have interactions with people that were against the North Vietnamese army, and they didn't feel like they could, even if the U.S. troops withdrew, they didn't feel like they could hold the government. There wasn't a popular support for that. And this is a country where you had active groups fighting against the oppressive regime that was there. In Iran, you don't really have that. You might say that they're civilian, and they have done polls. There's an institute in the Netherlands that did a poll that found, I think that was like 20% of Iranian civilians actually liked the current government, but a lot of them didn't know which direction to take it if, like the rest of them, didn't know which direction to take it if the government was gone, right? So that's not a stable situation. You have a mixture of people that are hardline conservatives who believe in Islamic law and government. You have a mixture of people that are secular, they want civil rights, they want women's rights, so on and so forth. Well, if you have this intense mixture, people that don't know how to run government, because that is a skill in itself, is running government, then I think your regime is going to fall apart. Your regime change will fall apart. And I think that's the issue. And if I had to take a guess, when the US has done regime change, like in Japan and Nazi Germany, and I would say partially that was probably successful because in the case of Nazi Germany, there was overwhelming force. I mean, the Germans were, I mean, decimated. I went to Germany this year, and oh my God, Berlin! It's totally just new infrastructure because everything got blown to crap. And in Japan, same thing. We dropped two bombs on them. They were losing troops against the Russians. There was overwhelming force applied to them, and they yielded. And surprisingly, Japan turned into a liberal democracy, and Germany was split into halves, west and east, but eventually became what is now a liberal democracy. So I'm not going to take the position that U.S. can never do regime change war, but there has to be clear goals where we have to be willing to spend a lot of money and a lot of time and be willing to risk U.S. troops on the ground, most likely, for it to happen. and you need popular support. If you don't have those things, I just don't think it's going to work very well.
Just to be snarky as fuck, the entire conservative movement for at least 10 years has been bitching and moaning about forever wars and not wanting to be involved in them, wanting to be pulled out of every conflict imaginable, never wanting to have any kind of troops die or like how much of a tragedy it is when troops die. I remember there's a story about one of the Afghanistan soldiers that died during our pullout, and Joe Biden was trying to console the father or parent, I believe, of that child. He was trying to be real with him and say like, yeah, I know what it's like to lose your son. I lost my son as well. And that fucking MAGA piece of like scumbag piece of shit was like, oh, we're not talking about your son. We're talking about my son that's dead right now or something like that. It's like, dude, he's not even making it about his son. He's just trying to like relate to you as a human. And just that's the kind of like energy that conservatives have towards Democrats when a soldier dies. But like, as you said, 17 people have died. More people have died in this war that conservatives started, but somehow the Democrats get blamed more for the US casualties that are involved in these wars.
Yeah, it's obscene. Also, I want to mention too that our deal maker in chief right now, he was the one who was saying that he was going to be, he wasn't going to be a warmonger, no more new wars. So, I mean, it just goes to show you that you can't trust him as far as you can throw him, which isn't very far. But yeah, so I think that's about what I had to say on this. I think we'll see, what happens in the next few months here.
Yeah.
I don't have
There's
high hope.
Yeah, sorry not to cut you off, but there's just one more thing that I wanted to go over, and it's just this political article about apparently the Trump administration is that this has never been an official war with between U.S. and Iran because a war and the Constitution delegated it to the Congress to officiate. This has been considered a military action, whatever, but that means that there's only 60 days until Congress declares war or not. And apparently, instead of it being seen as a military action that's gone on too long, apparently the clock has just reset because apparently the president could say the war is done or this military action's over and then start it right back up again, which is just fucking absurd.
Well, if anyone buys that line, I would ask them, when's the last time the US officially declared war on a country? Do you know?
Let's do World War II. I feel like everything is
It
after that's
was.
in the UN. Yeah.
It was World War II. So, I mean, if people don't think this is a war just because there's no congressional approval of war, or that he can magically reset the clock because he has a flimsy ceasefire that doesn't last more than a month or two, I don't buy it. It doesn't, because it's immaterial. It doesn't change anything. We still have all of our assets deployed over there. We're still spending billions of dollars on it. U.S. troops are still dying. None of it changes. We're still killing Iranian civilians and military and blowing shit up. Yeah, I mean, like, if someone uses that argument, I just don't feel like they're being serious.
Yeah, and I feel like I think this also just goes to show that this administration is willing to twist and bend the English language, the torture the English language really to fit whatever narrative they want to run with. Because no sane individual that's being good faith would see this and be like, oh yeah, that's just a 60-day incursion into another country, and they reset for a day and then they went right back to it. That's so it's a new 60-day incursion. They would never buy that. And if they did, then you know what? Good. I want you to keep that same energy when Democrats hold power, and I want you to never say anything like they do is unconstitutional because I'm just gonna torture the English language right back at you.
Yeah, I mean, if this is Biden, then they would never grant this. Could you imagine if Biden was like, "Oh yeah, this isn't war actually because I reset the clock"? Like, they would never do that. They would never fall for that.
Yeah, Brendan, that's correct. They would never buy this from a Democrat, and that's the issue. They will always buy it from a Republican. We just have to not. We don't need to sell it to them. We just need to do the same thing back at them because if and not try to play defense. We have to play the offense when Democrats regain power.
Well, for them to regain power, we have to start winning offices back. So get out and vote in the midterms. We can't. We had to get these warmongers out of here. They're not only they blowing up people that don't deserve it, they're also inflating your gas prices here at home. They're inflating your food prices here at home, and they're putting us in greater and greater debt. So we have to put an end to this.
That's correct. And thank you for listening. Catch you next time.
Yep. Bye.